They looked untouchable in 1970. Disciplined, fearless, saving Earth in silence. But time spared no one. Behind the cast of UFO were lives marked by loss, illness, and quiet tragedy. Join us as we uncover their real names, real ages, and what truly happened to them. Ed Bishop as Commander Ed Straker. Commander Ed Straker, the iron-willed leader of Shadow in UFO, was portrayed by Ed Bishop. At 38 years old, he stepped into the role in 1970, embodying authority, sacrifice, and emotional isolation. The character demanded calm under constant threat. What viewers never knew was how closely that pressure mirrored his real life. Born on June 11, 1932, in Brooklyn, New York, Ed Bishop grew in a working-class America crushed by the Great Depression. His childhood was defined by scarcity and anxiety. His father lost jobs overnight, his family counting every dollar, and he forced to mature too early. He worked while other children studied, carrying the quiet humiliation of poverty and the fear that stability could vanish at any moment. That early tension carved a seriousness into him that never fully left. His adult life offered success, but never peace. Bishop married young, and his first marriage in 1955 collapsed within months, strained by migration and financial uncertainty. His second marriage in 1962, which produced children, lasted decades, yet slowly eroded under long separations, professional pressure, and emotional exhaustion. Divorce left scars he rarely spoke about. Even when his career stabilized, with respected work like 2001, A Space Odyssey, and voice fame in Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, his private life felt like something permanently damaged. Behind the controlled exterior, his body was failing him. Years of heavy smoking damaged his lungs, and the stress of playing relentless authority figures took a physical toll. In his final years, illness tightened its grip when he was diagnosed with leukemia, weakening him just as he was slowing down. Surgery followed, then complications. Ed Bishop died on June 8, 2005, at 72 years old, just 3 days before his 73rd birthday, from a chest infection during leukemia treatment. He was buried in St. Lawrence Churchyard, Knapton, Warwickshire, beneath a gravestone marked with a peace symbol, resting near the grave of his son, killed years earlier in a car accident. His estimated net worth of $2 million stood as proof of a long, disciplined career, but nothing about his ending felt triumphant, only painfully human. Michael Billington as Colonel Paul Foster. Colonel Paul Foster, the physical and moral backbone of Shadow in UFO, was played by Michael Billington. At just 29 years old, he joined the series in 1970, bringing intensity, youth, and visible strain to the role. The performance was demanding, and it followed him long after filming stopped. Born on December 24, 1941 in England, during the chaos of World War II, Michael Billington's childhood was shaped by air raid sirens, evacuations, food shortages, and the constant fear of sudden loss. Education was disrupted, safety was temporary, and emotional stability was almost non-existent. Growing up under bombardment taught him resilience, but also left deep, unspoken psychological wounds that followed him into adulthood. As an actor, Billington lived with rejection as a constant companion. He chased major roles relentlessly and came painfully close to global fame, screen testing for James Bond multiple times, only to be passed over again and again. Each rejection cut deeper than the last. Though he found success in The Onden Line and appeared in The Spy Who Loved Me, he was haunted by the role that never came, a failure that eroded confidence and self-worth over time. His personal life reflected that same instability. His first marriage collapsed under career pressure and infidelity, leaving emotional wreckage behind. A later marriage brought companionship but not relief. Financial stress and professional disappointment lingered constantly. When pancreatic cancer struck, it advanced quickly and mercilessly. Michael Billington died on June 3, 2005, at 63 years old, after a rapid decline from cancer, just 5 days before Ed Bishop, his UFO co-star. He left behind an estimated net worth of $1.5 million, earned through acting and later teaching. His death was quiet, sudden, and cruel, closing the story of an actor who spent his life chasing greatness and never stopped paying the price. George Sewell as Colonel Alec Freeman. Colonel Alec Freeman, the calm yet burdened second-in-command of Shadow in UFO, was portrayed by George Sewell. At 46 years old, he carried the weight of restraint and moral balance. That quiet endurance was not acting, it was lived experience. George Sewell, born on August 31, 1924, in London, England, grew up in raw hardship. His father died early, leaving his mother to survive on exhausting, poorly paid work, and childhood ended abruptly when George left school at 14. He became a printer's apprentice not by choice, but by necessity, trading education for survival. The loss of learning, the constant fatigue, and the feeling of being trapped hardened him young, planting an unsure sense. Adulthood did not bring relief. It brought delay. After World War II, he worked as an aircraft engineer and laborer, drifting through physically punishing jobs before discovering acting almost by accident in his mid-30s. Money was always tight, and when success finally came through gritty roles in Special Branch and later Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, it arrived with pressure, not comfort. Recognition followed, including a British Film Award for Best Supporting Actor, but it never erased the bitterness of starting too late and always chasing stability. His personal life reflected the same strain. Sewell married Helen in 1950, a loyal partnership tested by long absences and family health crises that drained emotional reserves. He carried guilt for being away and fear for those left behind. As the years passed, chronic arthritis stiffened his body, turning everyday movement into pain, while decades of smoking quietly prepared a more lethal ending. George Sewell died on April 2, 2007, at 82 years old, from lung cancer. His passing was slow, physical, and unforgiving. He left behind an estimated net worth of $3 million, earned through relentless work rather than fame. His life closed not with triumph, but with the heavy silence of a man who survived everything except time. Dolores Mantez as Lieutenant Nina Barry. Lieutenant Nina Barry, the disciplined, visually iconic moonbase officer of UFO, was played by Dolores Mantez. At 34 years old, her presence was striking, controlled, and unforgettable. Yet behind the purple wig was a woman carrying years of quiet pain. Born in 1936 in Liverpool, England, Dolores Brenda Mantez came from an immigrant family navigating poverty and prejudice. Her childhood was shaped by racial discrimination, economic struggle, and early physical labor. She worked as a seamstress while still young, sewing for survival rather than dreaming of a future. The exhaustion was real, the limitations constant, and the message clear. She would have to fight harder than most just to be seen. Her career offered visibility, but at a cost. In the 1960s, she was repeatedly typecast as the exotic or strong woman, rarely allowed softness or depth. Roles in The Avengers and Doctor Who brought exposure, but little control. On UFO, the tight uniforms, long hours, and pressure to maintain a specific image drained her physically and emotionally. Success looked glamorous from the outside, but it felt like confinement from within. Her personal life became a refuge, and then another test. Her first marriage collapsed, strained by work demands and emotional distance. The pain pushed her inward. A second marriage brought stability, and motherhood reshaped her priorities, leading her to step away from acting entirely. Years later, illness returned with cruelty. Breast cancer, aggressive and unforgiving, stripping away what strength remained. Dolores Mantez died on November 30, 2012, at 76 years old, after losing her battle with cancer. She was cremated at Croydon Crematorium, her passing quiet, almost unnoticed by the industry she once served. Her estimated net worth of $800,000 reflected a life of work interrupted, potential narrowed by circumstance. Vladek Sheybal as Dr. Douglas Jackson. Dr. Douglas Jackson, the enigmatic psychiatrist inside Shadow in UFO, was portrayed by Vladek Sheybal. At 47 years old, his presence was calm, analytical, and unsettling. It felt less like performance than confession. Władysław Rudolf Zbigniew Sheybal was born on March 12, 1923, in Zgierz, Poland, into a world that would soon collapse. As a teenager during World War II, he was imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp, escaped, was recaptured, tortured, and imprisoned again. Survival demanded silence, calculation, and emotional armor, leaving scars that never healed and a nervous system permanently set to alert. After the war, displacement became his new prison. He fled Poland, drifted through Europe, and finally reached England, burdened by exile, politics, and language barriers. Speaking multiple languages but not yet English, he took menial work, taught acting to survive, and waited for doors that opened slowly. When recognition came, through From Russia with Love, 1963, and later The Wind and the Lion, 1975, it carried a typecasting curse. He was brilliant, memorable, and forever other, praised yet confined to menace and intellect. His private life offered no refuge. Sheybal never married, forming intense but unstable relationships that burned hot and ended quietly. Loneliness followed him into rooms filled with applause. Sooner, his health reflected that tension. Years of strain, relentless work, and the body's memory of trauma tightening its grip. Vladek Sheybal died on October 16, 1992, at 69, from a ruptured aortic aneurysm, sudden and merciless. He was buried at Putney Vale Cemetery in London, beneath a granite headstone. His estimated net worth of $1 million spoke to steady work, not safety. Grant Taylor as General James Henderson. General James Henderson, the abrasive power broker of Shadow and UFO, was played by Grant Taylor. At 53 years old, he radiated command and volatility. His authority was blunt, his temper visible. The role echoed a life lived hard. Ronald Grant Taylor was born on December 6, 1917, and raised in rural Australia after an early move from England. Poverty arrived early. Work arrived earlier. He labored young, boxed professionally, and learned that strength was currency. Childhood offered little softness, and that lesson followed him everywhere. War and performance collided in his adulthood. After military service and years entertaining troops, he surged to fame in 40,000 Horsemen, then watched momentum slip away. He crossed oceans to work in Britain, adapting again, always starting over. Credits like Quo Vadis, 1951, kept him visible, but awards never followed. The industry used his presence, then moved on. His marriages carried tragedy. Love was real, but so was illness and sudden loss. Partners taken by accidents and disease, children raised amid grief. Stability never lasted. He kept working through pain, through exhaustion, through the knowledge that time was shortening. Grant Taylor died on January 26, 1971, at 54 after a fatal car accident, just months after his work on UFO. His estimated net worth of $500,000 closed a life spent earning every step forward. He burned fast, stood tall, and vanished abruptly, leaving behind the shock of a career that ended almost as soon as it found new ground. Peter Gordeno as Captain. Peter Carlin. Captain Peter Carlin, the daring combat pilot and submarine captain in UFO, was played by Peter Gordeno. At 31 years old, his character trusted with high-risk missions, aerial combat, and split-second decisions that often meant life or death. His presence combined athletic precision with calm authority under pressure. Few realized that the discipline came from a life already shaped by upheaval. Peter Gordeno, later known professionally as Peter Gordeno, was born on June 20th, 1939, in Rangoon, Burma, to a family caught between cultures and continents. His childhood was fractured by war and forced migration, uprooting him before he could form any sense of stability. Moving across borders meant losing friends, language, and safety again and again. Later, he found refuge in movement. Dance became survival before it became art, but the path was brutal. As he transitioned from dancer to actor, repeated injuries threatened to end everything he had built with his body. He worked relentlessly, performing on stages and in films, later appearing in projects like Carry On Columbus, 1992, yet the strain never eased. His personal life reflected the same imbalance. 2 marriages collapsed, both strained by constant travel, physical exhaustion, and the emotional distance created by an unstable career. Loneliness followed success. In later years, his body betrayed him again with Parkinson's disease, slowly robbing him of the very movement that once saved his life. Peter Gordeno died on October 18, 2008, at 69 years old after years of illness. His estimated net worth of $700,000 reflected decades of hard-earned work across dance, music, choreography, and acting. He left behind not just roles, but the quiet tragedy of a man who lived through motion and was finally stilled by fate. Norma Ronald as Miss Ealand, the ever-present secretary standing beside Power in UFO, was portrayed by Norma Ronald. At 35 years old, her performance gave weight to the spaces between authority and obedience, showing how strength often lives in silence rather than command. That quiet resilience on screen mirrored a life built on sacrifice long before fame arrived. Born on March 1, 1937, in Northumberland, England, into modest means, Norma Ronald's childhood was not marked by spectacle, but by persistent poverty, where ambition had to be practical and dreams felt indulgent. She entered repertory theater young, often playing roles far older than herself, learning early how to disappear into others to survive. Her career followed the same pattern. She became dependable, familiar, and quietly trapped, typecast as secretaries and supporting women, never the center, always the structure holding scenes together. Appearances in series like The Saint and long-running radio work kept her employed, but recognition stayed just out of reach. Stability came at the cost of visibility. Her private life carried deeper pain. Married once, she endured the devastating loss of a child, a grief that permanently altered her inner world. Acting slowly receded as radio became a safer space, less exposure, fewer expectations. Even as she gave care to others through charity work later in life, her own strength was failing. Norma Ronald died on November 20th, 1993, at 58 years old from leukemia after a quiet, painful decline. Her estimated net worth of $400,000 reflected a life of steady work without protection or privilege. Harry Baird as Lieutenant Mark Bradley. Lieutenant Mark Bradley, the disciplined shadow officer in UFO, was portrayed by Harry Baird. At 39 years old, he brought a rare sense of quiet authority to the role, making Bradley feel competent and present, rather than symbolic. His performance masked a life shaped by resistance, long before cameras followed him. Harry Baird was born on May 12, 1931, in Georgetown, British Guiana, and his childhood quickly became a lesson in exclusion. After migrating, racial discrimination was not subtle. It dictated where he could train, work, and even belong. Opportunities came with conditions, and acceptance always felt temporary. The psychological pressure of proving worth in hostile spaces hardened him early, leaving confidence forged through survival rather than encouragement. His career placed him at the front line of representation, but never at ease. Baird became one of Britain's earliest visible black film actors, yet roles were narrowly defined and painfully repetitive. His breakthrough in Sapphire, 1959, confronted racism directly, but instead of opening doors, it often reinforced typecasting. Even appearances in respected productions like UFO came with limits, as visibility increased but control remained out of reach. His personal life reflected isolation rather than stability. Baird remained largely unmarried, maintaining distance that friends described as protective rather than cold. In the 1970s, he was diagnosed with glaucoma, a cruel condition that slowly robbed him of sight and forced an early retreat from acting. As blindness progressed, independence narrowed, and later heart disease added another silent battle to an already exhausted body. Harry Baird died on February 13, 2005, at 74 years old after prolonged illness. He passed away in London, far from the spotlight he once helped reshape. His estimated net worth of $600,000 reflected persistence, not privilege. His legacy is not measured in awards, but in the quiet shock of realizing how much he endured simply to remain visible. Gabrielle Drake, as Lieutenant Gay Ellis. Lieutenant Gay Ellis, the commanding moon-base leader in UFO, was portrayed by Gabrielle Drake. At 26 years old, she gave the role intelligence, authority, and emotional restraint, redefining how women in science fiction could lead rather than assist. Her performance on screen was born from years of instability off it. Gabrielle Drake was born on March 30, 1944, in Lahore, British India, into a childhood without roots. Constant relocation due to her father's work meant homes were temporary and friendships fragile. When the family returned to Britain, rationing and austerity replaced comfort, creating a sharp emotional contrast. That instability taught her adaptability, but also embedded a quiet tension that never fully disappeared. After UFO, the industry narrowed its gaze. Drake found herself typecast, boxed into images that stripped nuance from her talent. She continued working relentlessly, eventually finding broader recognition in The Brothers and later long-running television dramas, while maintaining a respected stage career. A BAFTA nomination acknowledged her ability, but did little to protect her from professional limitation. Her personal life carried a deeper, irreversible wound. In 1970, she married Louis DeWitt, a relationship marked by loyalty and creative partnership. Yet the death of her brother, musician Nick Drake, left a lasting emotional fracture. She became the guardian of his legacy, carrying grief alongside responsibility, love intertwined permanently with loss. In 2026, Gabrielle Drake is 82 years old. She lives quietly, focused on preserving artistic heritage rather than seeking attention. Her estimated net worth of $4 million reflects decades of work and stewardship rather than spectacle. Her story endures as one of quiet endurance, strong, restrained, and shaped by sorrow rather than noise. Wanda Ventham as Colonel Virginia Lake. Colonel Virginia Lake, the composed second-in-command inside Shadow in UFO, was portrayed by Wanda Ventham. At 35 years old, she gave the role measured authority and credibility, proving that command could be calm rather than aggressive. Her presence was the surface of a life shaped by early disruption. Born on August 5, 1935, in Brighton, England, Wanda Ventham's childhood was fractured by war. As bombs fell and families were displaced, she experienced evacuation and separation, learning uncertainty before adolescence. Safety felt temporary, routines dissolved, and emotional grounding had to be rebuilt repeatedly. Those early dislocations taught restraint and self-containment. Her career unfolded steadily but never effortlessly. Trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama, she worked continuously across British television, often supporting stories rather than owning them, a quiet pressure that followed her for decades. Roles in Doctor Who and later Only Fools and Horses brought visibility, yet the industry's ceiling remained firm. Being reliable did not always mean being rewarded. her private life carried its own corrections. A first marriage ended, leaving emotional fallout during years already crowded with work. Stability arrived later with actor Timothy Carlin, a partnership that endured and grew into shared creativity. Motherhood added another layer, pride intertwined with the protective instinct born of her own unsettled youth. In 2026, Wanda Ventham is 91 years old. She lives quietly after a lifetime of steady contribution, her legacy renewed through family and decades of television history. Her estimated net worth of $5 million reflects longevity and consistency rather than spectacle. Her story endures as proof that strength can be understated and last. Ayshea Brough as Lieutenant Ayshea Johnson. Lieutenant Ayshea Johnson, the bright, youthful presence at Shadow's communications desk in UFO, was played by Ayshea Brough. At 22 years old, she brought freshness and immediacy to the role, giving the series a human counterweight to its severity. Her energy made the world feel lived in, not just defended. That visibility came with a cost she would only understand later. Ayshea Haig was born on November 12, 1948, in London, and entered the public eye almost before she could choose it. Childhood was outwardly normal, but early exposure to show business brought adult expectations into a young life. Attention arrived before armor, and pressure followed closely behind. Performance became habit long before identity settled. Her career moved fast, then demanded reinvention. As a singer and presenter, she fronted Liftoff with Ayshea, a hit that made her a familiar face while quietly narrowing perception of her range. Transitioning between music, television, and acting proved difficult as trends shifted. Visibility faded faster than it had arrived, forcing adaptation rather than applause. Her personal life mirrored that volatility. Relationships formed under spotlight pressure and fractured under its weight, including a high-profile engagement that collapsed, leaving emotional residue. Marriage followed, then separation, and eventually, a deliberate turn away from fame. She rebuilt quietly, choosing privacy and control after years without either. In 2026, Ayshea Brough is 78 years old. She lives outside the glare, having reshaped her life beyond entertainment while remaining a remembered face of a singular era. Her estimated net worth of $2 million reflects a career of reinvention rather than accumulation. Antonia Ellis as Lieutenant Joan Harrington. Lieutenant Joan Harrington, the elegant moon base officer in UFO, was portrayed by Antonia Ellis. At 26 years old, she brought poise and restraint to the role, making Harrington feel efficient, intelligent, and emotionally contained rather than decorative. Her brief presence concealed a life already shaped by pressure and withdrawal. Antonia Marie Ellis was born on April 30th, 1944, in Newport, Isle of Wight, England, and entered adulthood under the strict gaze of the fashion world. Before acting, she worked as a model, an environment ruled by judgment, silence, and constant evaluation. Youth came with expectations to conform, to be seen but not heard, creating a subtle psychological strain. That early conditioning taught her discipline, but also distance from herself. Her professional path moved quickly, then quietly closed. After UFO, Ellis appeared in projects such as The Protectors, yet the momentum never hardened into permanence. Acting and modeling offered visibility without security, and the industry's appetite for youth proved fleeting. Rather than fight for diminishing space, she chose to step back. Her personal life remained intentionally private. Ellis married once, forming a family away from cameras and industry noise. Stability mattered more than attention, and privacy became a form of protection. She refused to trade peace for relevance. In 2026, Antonia Ellis is 82 years old. She lives outside the spotlight, remembered briefly but distinctly for a role that arrived and vanished like the era itself. Her estimated net worth of $1 million reflects a short but focused career, followed by a conscious retreat. Gary Myers as Captain Lou Waterman. Captain Lou Waterman, the interceptor pilot who later commanded Skydiver in UFO, was portrayed by Gary Myers. At 30 years old, he gave the role physical confidence and decisiveness, turning Waterman into a credible frontline operator rather than a background figure. His presence injected athletic realism into the series' action. That assurance was built on a life of constant movement. Gary Myers was born on July 22, 1941, in Australia, and grew up adapting rather than settling. Early life involved migration and repeated adjustment, learning new environments, rules, and identities. Stability was rare, and self-reliance became essential. That restlessness later translated into physical discipline and control. Before acting, Myers served as a physical training instructor in the Australian Army, then moved through multiple countries chasing opportunity. Modeling opened doors, but acting confined him. After UFO, he became widely recognizable as the original milk tray man, a role that brought fame while quietly typecasting him as an action symbol. Appearances in series like The Professionals followed, but the range remained limited. Over time, the industry's repetition lost its appeal. In the 1980s, he returned to Australia, stepping away from international screens. Today, Gary Myers is 86 years old. He lives in retirement, remembered for iconic imagery rather than sustained stardom. His estimated net worth of $900,000 reflects steady work rather than excess. Time has passed, faces have aged, and some voices have fallen silent. But the legacy of UFO 1970 still lingers in unexpected ways. Behind the sleek uniforms and futuristic dreams were real lives marked by sacrifice, struggle, and sudden turns no script could predict. So when the cameras stopped rolling, who found peace? And who paid a far heavier price? If this journey moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And tell us in the comments, which UFO cast story shocked you the most?